All right. Hello, everybody. We are going to get started. Good afternoon, and we are going to jump right into our legislative advocacy webinar for the 2021 legislative session. So just a few points of housekeeping before we get started. All attendees should be muted upon entry. We just ask that you stay muted. There will be designated points during today's presentation where you will be able to ask questions. So you can unmute yourselves and ask questions then, or you can type them directly into the chat box, clicking on the circled in red chat icon. You should just be able to type your messages directly in there. We will be monitoring that throughout the presentation, and we'll raise any questions we see when the question sections pop up in the presentation. We're also recording today's webinar, and we'll be sending out all the slides along with the recording of today's presentation to everybody following the event, maybe not immediately after, but within the next week or so, you'll have this information available on our website. So today we have with us from Gallo and Robinson, we have Kate Robinson and Bill Wells. We also have myself, Danielle Hubley, who will be presenting, and Chelsea Ross, who will be presenting with us as well. Kaylee Pratt is with the Reaching Home campaign's sister campaign, HOMEConnecticut, and we did a pre-recording of the HOMEConnecticut legislative priorities. So we'll be including that in today's recording, and we'll include the slides from that presentation as well. So you'll have all of this on the back end, but Kaylee will not be presenting with us today. So with that, we'll get ready to jump right in. Today, we're going to talk about the 2021 governor's proposed budget and any updates that we're aware of. We'll dive into what to expect during a virtual legislative session and how to engage in advocacy during the pandemic. And then we'll wrap it up with going through the Reaching Home campaign's legislative priorities and talking about some of the messaging and details that we know about that. So with that, I will pass it over to Gallo and Robinson to walk us through some of the budget updates.
I guess I'll kick off. Nice to see you all today. I actually can't see you all, but I assume you're all here somewhere. I can see my four presenters or co-presenters right now, but nice to be with you all again in this virtual setting. I hope we don't have to be in this virtual setting for too much longer. Hopefully the world gets healthy again and we can get some vaccines out there. But for now, this is where we are, and this is where we are in a virtual session too. So we're going to keep plugging through. That's us with Gallo and Robinson, and you can click the next slide and we'll get started on a budget update. So where are we this year? We're in 2021. This is the odd year. This is the long session. We started in January 6th. We're going to be going till June 9th. This is the big year. This is what we call the big show. This is the budget setting year. This is the year where the legislature is putting all of their effort into creating the biennium budget. They're hosting hearings, they're reviewing the governor's budget, they're going to create their own budget, they're doing public hearings, they're doing committee meetings, they're doing everything they can to build up a biennium budget that's supposed to last us for the next 2 years. Next year, 2022, which is the even year, is the short session. That goes from February 9th to May 4th. That's the budget adjustment year. And that year is really just to take the biennium budget that they passed and make any kind of adjustments from the year before based on revenues coming in or other impacts, economic impacts that occur with the state. We can go to the next slide. We have a little bit of a timeline here. I got to move my little picture here so I can actually see it. There we go. This is a kind of our timeline of the budget. The governor released his budget on February 10th. I'm sure a lot of you guys got it sent around. We sent it around to our clients, who I'm sure shared it with you guys. Right now, and this is a lot later than it typically is in the process, the Appropriation Committee has been handling budget hearings. It feels like they've been going on forever, but they've been doing virtual hearings. They've had to delay a few meetings because of the chambers going into a vote, but they are almost wrapped up. They should be wrapped up around early next week. They're going to be plugging away on their final public hearing portions of the budget process and wrap that part up. From there, the next thing that will be coming up is at some point this month, the Finance Committee is going to be doing a public hearing on the bonding agenda. So the governor has a bonding package. The committee has raised some bonding initiatives. We anticipate that there will be a robust bonding public hearing, but that's only just going to be probably one day, as opposed to where the Appropriations Committee is going through multiple days of different parts of the budget. But in between, I guess we didn't write this on our timeline, but part of what's going on after the hearings and before the committee deadline is the committees have subcommittees. So for housing, there's a conservation and development subcommittee that deals with everything related to housing, and they really look at the line items in housing. You have the health subcommittee of appropriations that looks into Department of Public Health and mental health services and stuff like that. They're going through and they're doing like they're taking all the information from the public hearing. They're going into subcommittees with the agencies and asking them direct questions about what people testified on and direct questions about their line items and trying to get answers on what they should be funding things at. And they're kind of creating their part of the budget, which will be handed off to the Appropriations Committee. On April 22nd, the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee has a deadline. And before that deadline, they're likely to pass a bonding package and they're likely to pass a revenue package, meaning what they're willing to have fund all of the services that Approps is looking for. And then on April 23rd, the Appropriations Committee has an appropriations deadline where they put their kind of list together of things that they want to work on. This all culminates on June 9th, where legislative session ends. They have to get everything kind of wrapped up by that point, and we'll go a little more in depth in that later. But I wanted to at least give you the timeline from there. We can go to the next one. The budget landscape that we're in right now. We're in fiscal year 2021 right now. It's July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. The fiscal year always starts on July 1. Right now, we are in a projected surplus. Comptroller Lembo, sorry, that's my dog shaking. Comptroller Lembo is projecting a $131.4 million surplus. Governor Lamont in his revised budget put out $137.6 million. So as you can see, they're pretty close to each other. We also have a rainy day fund that's at an unprecedented $3.55 billion right now. It grows every time we see the number. We've never seen the rainy day fund in such shape. But the word of caution in the out years, Connecticut has significant fiscal constraints that they have not addressed. And in each of the out years, we're looking at least a $1.3 billion deficit. So for all that, $131.4 million in surplus looks like a drop in the bucket when you're talking about a $1.3 billion deficit. So the fiscal challenges of Connecticut are real. We've had a little bit of cash infusion because of the pandemic, with the federal government passing off some money to the state of Connecticut. But this is kind of patchwork the legislature is going to have to make some big decisions on how it's going to address the future of Connecticut's fiscal reality. I'm going to go to the next one. And then I'll give it to Kate, who gets to talk about the governor's budget. And there's a nice picture of him.
Nice picture. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry that I haven't had a chance to see a lot of you in person this session, but I trust everybody's doing the right thing and sticking close to home, wearing masks and washing hands. So as you all know, the governor makes a proposal and then the Appropriations Committee makes a counter proposal. So we're going to talk for a couple of minutes about what was in the governor's proposal. Go ahead, Danielle. And just as a disclaimer, I am terrible with math, so don't ask me to do any math on the fly, but I will read these numbers as competently as I can. So the housing homeless line item is one of the biggest line items that we pay attention to. It's in the Department of Housing's budget. The housing and homeless line item funding in the governor's proposal is at $81.9 million for each year of the biennium, but it's actually a decrease from the previous years. And the reason that they decreased the line item is because of money follows the person, which is a program that helps people exit nursing homes, is falling behind what was projected. So they cut the housing homeless line item because those nursing home exits are not meeting targets. The homeless youth program is funded at $2.6 million in the first year of the biennium and $2.9 million in the second year of the biennium. It actually demonstrates an increase of about $350,000 in the first year and $640,000 in the second year. This will also cover this homeless services line to fund the youth homeless demonstration grant. The governor has also transferred to DEMIS, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, about $350,000 in each of the next 2 years for wraparound services for 47 people expected to receive HUD vouchers, or Housing and Urban Development Federal vouchers. Okay, next slide, please. So over in the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, which is where the wraparound funding is, or the services that get paired with the housing. So housing supports and services is funded at $23.4 million, and it demonstrates a slight increase of $391,000 in the first year and about $440,000 in the second year. Discharge and diversion services line actually saw a significant increase. And by discharge and diversion, what that basically means is getting people out of hospital settings, in particular mental hospital settings, but also preventing people from going into the hospital in the first place. So there's a significant increase in that line item. It may or may not have something to do with a lawsuit that was filed by Connecticut Legal Rights Project. This is the second time the governor has put forward a significant increase in this line. But as you all know, we didn't pass any budget adjustments last year. So this is kind of re-upping that commitment in the new biennium. Young adult services also saw an increase. It is a big line item. It has $78.3 million in it. The increases are relatively small relative to the size of the line, of about $350,000 in the first year and $1.4 million in the second year. And likewise, grants for mental health services, those are the community services, the basically implemented by the not-for-profit sector. That is funded at $66.5 million in the first year and $66.6 in the second, demonstrating a slight increase, $150,000 in the first year and about $330,000 in the second year. I get all the fun stuff. Thanks, Bill. All right. Actually, bonding feels fun. It feels like a credit card. It's real money, kind of. So the governor's proposals, new bond authorizations for the Housing Trust Fund are funded at $55 million in the first year of the biennium and $50 million in the second year of the biennium. There are also new bond authorizations for Affordable Housing Flex at $100 million for each year of the biennium. And out of that $100 million of each year, $30 million goes to support the state-sponsored housing portfolio, basically the state-owned public housing that's all throughout the state, about 13,000 units statewide. And then there are new bond authorizations for grants for not-for-profits for about $1 million in each year of the biennium. Last but not least, the Community Investment Act has been an important vehicle for funding services, particularly around the Reaching Home agenda. It supports the work of the Coordinated Access Network. And this is the first year in a very long time there hasn't been some sort of threat, either in writing or verbally, to sweep the Community Investment Act funds. The funds are what we call off budget. They are raised through a $40 recording fee on all land transactions. So it's a fee-based service, not a tax, or a fee-based program, not a tax. So that's why it's not part of general fund expenditures. A portion of these funds, 1/4 basically, goes to the Department of Housing to support the coordinated system to end homelessness, but the commissioner of the Department of Housing has discretion over how those funds are used. We have worked cooperatively with her for years and with the previous administration for years around the coordinated access network, but we would like very much to codify the coordinated access network and get those funds funded through the traditional budgeting process so that they have a line item in the Department of Housing. As Bill put in the slide, the governor did not put out a proposal to sweep the funds, and we are very grateful for that.
So
I'm going to send it back to Bill.
to get us back on, I kind of went over this, but where we are in the biennium cycle, as I said, right now we're in the public hearing process. Many of you have submitted testimony. Some of you have also got on the Zoom and testified yourself, and thank you for doing that. It's worth the long hours of waiting. Your advocacy means so much to legislators to hear from you guys and to actually hear the frontline impacts of the budget. The subcommittees are going to work out recommendations to the two chairs, though, health and conservation and development are the two that you guys watch the most. We'll be watching the subcommittee meetings. We will be working with the chairs of the subcommittees to see if we can get, some changes into there to beef up a few things if possible. The appropriations committee is going to deliberate prior to their deadline. And they are going to kind of pass what they believe is the legislature's budget. This is going to be like this is what we want versus what the governor wants. And then the fun part begins. Once that deadline hits, it goes down to negotiation. The governor, leadership of the House and the Senate, which may or may not include the Republicans in the House and Senate, because some years they are invited to join. Sometimes they join for a little bit, and then things change and they get asked not to join. It really depends on how well people are working together and how productive the conversation is to getting a balanced budget. And the appropriations chairs and usually the finance, revenue, and bonding chairs are also part of these things. It really doesn't expand out further than that. And I would say that appropriations and finance chairs aren't always in the room, but they do get into the room for some of it. But you will not see kind of like your standard state rep who's like serves on committees will not be in the room for this. Their participation happens afterwards when a deal is struck and the caucuses do a caucus together and talk about what's in the budget, and they hear from their members on if they like it or not and decide whether or not they need to go back to the governor and negotiate more or not. But very few people are in the room where it happens, where we talk about all the time. One person who's not on my PowerPoint slide, but who's always in the room with the governor is the Secretary of OPM. Secretary Melissa McCaw is always there, along with some of the governor's high-level staff to get through this stuff. Regarding the state budget, Kate kind of went over the explicit points that we track for you guys, but as a whole, we wanted to kind of leave you guys with some information. So the governor's budget includes no broad-based tax increases. It leans heavily on current and anticipated federal aid to close the deficit. As I said, we have future outgoing federal state deficits that are very large, 1.3 billion each year, and that will only continue in the future. The governor's budget also slows 170 million of previously approved tax cuts. There are constituencies for every single pledged tax cut that the governor proposes to cancel or slow, and they all are going to be coming out into the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, and they're going to be talking about the impact of losing those tax cuts. The governor did not propose expanding Medicaid eligibility to cover more Florida residents, even though that is something that we've heard a lot during the pandemic that was needed. The governor also did not recommend a rate increase for the private nonprofit agencies that deliver essential services, but did propose some additional funding to cover increased caseloads. The governor is still reluctant to draw down on the rainy day fund that now sits at $3.55 billion. I think that there's going to be, there will be some wiggle room in there to deal with some issues, And he's talked about using it temporarily until federal aid comes in officially to cover things. But as a whole, the governor really wants to preserve the majority of that rainy day fund for a rainy day, or for what's going to happen once the state no longer has this kind of federal aid coming in. Last slide. And then this all comes down to balancing the budget. The governor and the legislature will have to cut spending, raise revenue, or they'll have to do a combination of both to get this thing done. Regardless, at the end of session, the budget has to be in balance. There is no other option, and they will produce a document that will do so. And that is it. We'll take some questions. Or not.
Yes, if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, Chelsea, if there's questions in the chat pertaining to this issue, we can raise them now, or we'll pause and we can move forward.
I don't see any in the chat, Danielle. We can wait a second, and folks know outside of the webinar that they can contact folks with questions. And throughout, if you are thinking about the budget and you have questions later on, we'll pause again 2 other times, so you don't lose your chance now.
Chelsea, this is Sonia Jelks, if I may ask a question.
Sure, go ahead, Sonia.
Just based on the information that Kate and Bill just presented to us, does that tie directly to the legislative ask package that we've sent up through the Reaching Home campaign? Do those numbers align with, or at least look to be aligning to what our ask may be?
So you're setting me up. I'm gonna talk about our agenda and how what's in the budget aligns and doesn't align with our agenda in the 3rd part of our webinar. So stay tuned, Sonia.
All right, thank you.
I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, Danielle. So if you want to move forward with your section, and folks can type in questions if they have any.
Awesome. All right. So with that, my name is Danielle Hughley. I am the resident policy analyst with the Partnership for Strong Communities. I also help staff the Reaching Home campaign and provide support to the Reaching Home campaign. And a quick thank you to Kate and Bill for all that really great information. And as Chelsea said, we'll dive into how it relates to our legislative agenda and our priorities momentarily. But first, I want to take a moment to just walk us through what the virtual session looks like, what we've learned so far, and different ways that we can engage in advocacy during this unique time. So as I said, and generally, this is all years are important for advocacy, but this year, as we know, especially given the last 12 months that we've faced, this is a really important year for advocacy. And already a lot of significant concerns and issues have come up in the legislature that also need to be addressed along with ours. So this is just a reminder that making sure our asks and our messages are very clear and concise is going to be really critical in successful advocacy this session. So like I said before, we're really going to focus on best practices and the best ways that we know to date on how you can communicate with your elected officials during the pandemic. So some general higher level changes that you can expect or might already be familiar with at this point is that due to the pandemic, we're anticipating this session will take place about 100% virtually as we move through the next few months. So this includes changes to how committees are conducting their public hearings and also their meetings. They're broadcasting both on either CTN or they've started a YouTube account where they're live streaming the hearings. So you can view them, I believe, at either location, but I would definitely check both just to be certain if that's something you're looking for. There's also changes to how we're testifying and how we're submitting testimony and how you will virtually testify. So those processes are a little bit different. And a big change this year is that, unfortunately, because we can't all convene in person, we will not be having our traditional sort of advocacy day. So we really wanted to use this time to talk through the different ways that you might be able to connect with your legislators and representatives today. So if you're looking for more information or more specifics or more details on this process, there's 2 locations you can go to. I'll have Chelsea right now drop in the chat the link to PSC's advocacy webpage. We're trying to build this as best we can a one-stop shop for all information related to the session. So this will be a great resource for you as you move forward. And I know also that the Connecticut General Assembly, or the CGA, their website also has updates, and they're making up-to-date changes as they move through their process. So both of these places are spaces where you can go find more information. You're also welcome to reach out to any of us directly. We'll help facilitate any questions you might have also. So from there, I just wanted to highlight some of the materials that we're providing. Since it is a virtual session, there's not going to be as many opportunities for face-to-face direct conversations with our representatives. So as easy as we can make it, we tried to create update a bunch of different fact sheets, contact resource lists, our agendas, and information relevant to the last year's worth of collected data in our work, to just highlight and provide some more context and background to some of the asks that we're going in to make. So this is an opportunity for you to attach these when you connect with legislators, link them in your testimony, share them as you're having conversations with folks. We just wanted to make you aware of all of these. Chelsea, if you want, you can drop, we've pulled out all of these links individually, so you can click on them from the chat box, but these are all linked directly in. So once you get the slides, you'll be able to just click on them directly and it'll take you to them. And these are also all available on our resources page. If not all of them, you can find most of them there, and the rest will be found on our website. So as far as general advocacy goes, we're asking that you take cues from our action alerts. They are provided so that you have an easy opportunity to take action. So this not only gives you a template for submitting testimony, and gives you details on how to submit that testimony to the legislature and how to sign up to testify virtually. Since this year, we can't sign up our campaign members as a group. Everyone has to sign up independently if you plan to testify. So we highlight all of those processes in our action alerts. I will just note for you that we've been seeing and hearing that the committees are operating a little bit differently from one another in terms of how they conduct these processes. So we'll include all of the details in our action alerts. We just ask that you read them carefully to make sure that what you're submitting is to the right place and that you're signing up by the right time, because again, they're all operating just slightly differently this session. We also encourage you to take that template and build on it with your own personal experience, your own expertise, and any stories or anecdotes that you have to highlight why we're asking for these legislative changes. That's really important in not only our advocacy, but in the legislators' advocacy at the legislature, to be able to share these stories and experiences as they're pushing for these changes with us. And lastly, if you're not feeling comfortable testifying, submitting testimony, or sharing your own experiences, we just ask that you shoot your email or shoot your representatives an email. It can be super quick. It's not supposed to be time intensive. It can be even just a few sentences stating your name, how you would like them to vote on particular issues and why. And again, this is a great opportunity to share some of those additional links as well. So really just as many ways as possible that you can stay in touch with your representatives, the better. Which really builds into my next point on connecting and building these relationships. Your legislative leaders are here to represent you. You elect them to lead for you and to make decisions for your community. So you hold a lot of power, and we encourage you to use that power to begin to build those relationships with the people who you elect to lead you. You probably got an email from, I believe, Chelsea earlier on at the start of session, stating something very similar to what is included in this slide, but to send an email to reach out to your representatives, let them know where you live or where you work so that they know that they're representing you and the district you live in. Again, state what your expertise is and what you're passionate and most passionate about seeing change in this legislative session. Again, attach any additional materials that might provide more context or information for them. You're also going to want to make sure that you include a phone number or an email, so that way if they have follow-up questions or want to connect more on something, they have a direct point of contact. And we also are encouraging you to ask to set virtual meetings with your representatives. Since we can't see folks face-to-face, this is as close to face-to-face as we can get. And it's going to be really, really important that we can have these conversations when we can schedule them. So if you are planning to schedule a virtual meeting, or you already are working on getting that done, or it's something you're thinking about exploring, we just wanted to provide some tips that might be helpful to you. So the first thing is that you're really going to want to focus on one or two of your top priorities from our policy agenda. As Chelsea will go through later, we have many this year that we are looking to elevate and advance. So picking your top one or two will make sure that you have time to really dive into those issues, speak to what you understand about them, and that they won't get diluted by trying to run through all of them in, maybe a 20 or 15-minute meeting if that's all you can schedule with them. You're also going to want to take some time in advance of the meeting to really just talk through how you're planning to move through the meeting. For those of you who are familiar with RBF, really think about what the result of this meeting is that you want. You can think about that as crafting your elevator speech or your 1-minute pitch, but really just think about what ask you're hoping to make to your legislators and how you're going to convey that as quickly as possible, because it just helps you move through the meeting in a productive way and it helps them feel like they can leave with some action to take from there. Make time to thank them. Everybody is really busy in this world and it's not easy for us to convene, and we're all trying to figure out how to operate in this space and in this new way. So just being thoughtful and thankful of the time that we have with each other is going to continue to help push our goals forward. And lastly, just remember that it's okay if you don't have all the information in a meeting. In fact, it's probably better if you have something that you can follow up with and send an email just to continue that conversation and continue to have a back and forth with your representative, but don't feel like you have to come in knowing everything. It's important that we make sure they have accurate information and not just information that we want them to have when we're in those meetings. So just a reminder. As you're thinking about these virtual meetings, think about who might be helpful to have in that space with you. So you're probably going to want to choose, as best you can, if you can bring in multiple partners, a wide variety of different speakers. So some things to keep in mind are any of the people who you're planning to have come with you, are they a constituent of the representative or elective official you're planning to meet with? It's really helpful to state that up front so that they know that they're serving you directly and can respond to issues directly on your behalf because they are there to represent you. So it's helpful to just make note of that in these meetings. You might also want to take this opportunity to bring in other community partners or providers that you've been working with. Over the last 12 months, we've all been working with a wide variety of different partners. So this can include partners within your community that are from hospitals, within the municipality, any leaders, maybe folks from libraries or soup kitchens. It's really up to you, but think about who might be there to help convey this message and provide a perspective on it that you yourself might not be able to provide. And most importantly, I think, is making space for those who have lived experience or personal experiences with homelessness themselves. This is a space for you to have power to speak with your legislator. This is a space for you to raise your voice and use that power. And I think it's really important that we're making that space and providing this opportunity for folks who have this direct experience to show the real impact of these policies on an individual or on a family's life. And lastly, something just to keep in mind is that we do this every year during the session, but this is something you can be thinking about, and advocacy is something I would challenge you to think about year-round. You have 12 whole months to engage different people in these conversations. And as we operate in collective impact, it's really important that we get a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different input on the work that we do. So engaging leaders in your community, your municipal leaders, different citizens in your community spaces, on how we're working to end homelessness and how we can work together to create the changes we think are necessary. This is something you can be doing all year round. It's something you can be doing during session, but just something to be thinking about. As well, year round, or especially during session, you can host virtual legislative breakfasts, meet and greets, different opportunities as a way to invite your legislators or representatives to be able to come and learn more about your organization, your work, your day-to-day experiences, the impact you have, and any challenges or successes you're having. It gives them a touch point in their community, and it gives them a sense of the real work that's going on behind the scenes that they might not be in touch with all the time. So that's a really great way to get them connected to the work and to get them to see what's going on in your communities. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, just make sure that you're thankful, especially if they end up voting favorably on a bill that you've testified on or you're passionate about seeing move forward. We're all doing this work and we're all trying to figure out how to make this work as best we can in this new environment. And we all really love being recognized for the hard work that we're doing. It also helps us build allyship in the state capitol, and it helps us feel like we're all working together to solve these problems as a team and not working against each other in any regard. So it's just an important thing to keep in mind, but it's things you can do all year round. And you have many, many opportunities beyond this to also engage as well. So I'll stop and ask if folks have any questions. I think I covered everything that I needed to, but yeah, if folks have any questions, I'll stop there and let you ask them now.
Danielle, we just have one question that was submitted around translation services in this session. So this might be a question for Kate and Bill for what you know about if folks are themselves or have someone that they're working with who needs to testify in a different language. How do they go about indicating that they need translation services? Do you know?
So this has actually come up quite a bit this session, which is really interesting. As far as we've been able to tell and manage with limited success, the best way to proceed if a person needs assistance with translation in Spanish, and the other circumstance has been if somebody needs an accommodation because they rely on American Sign Language because they're hearing impaired. So I'll take Spanish first, and then I'll take hearing impaired second. For Spanish speakers who want to testify, they would be responsible for having to supply their own translator. Both of those people have to sign up for the public hearing, and then we need to, or somebody needs to notify the clerk of the committee that, you know, Kate Robinson speaks Spanish and Bill Wells will be translating for her. And the clerk of the committee will make sure that both people are available or are testifying at the same time. That is happening with limited success in the Labor Committee right now. It's not perfect, but that's the way we have found for it to work so far. So you have to kind of communicate committee by committee. It's not just a blanket thing. As it relates to people who rely on interpretation services who are hearing impaired, you need to notify the committee clerk several days in advance, and they can arrange for an ASL interpreter for the person who is hearing impaired, but it needs to be arranged several days in advance because there are so few people who have those skills.
Thanks, Kate.
Okay.
And another question around sort of the change in the virtual environment about subbing. So the ability, if you can't take your slot, if you can sub someone else from your organization or someone else into your slot. I think I know the answer, but I'll let you answer, Bill or Kate.
Bill, do you want to take a turn?
So
Don't do it.
subbing was never really an approved thing. Some people get away with it somehow. And I can tell you as a lobbyist, and Kate can tell you as a lobbyist, that when it happens, and even if they got away with it, somebody hears about it. And if it's one of our guys, it's usually Kate and I. And, you know, so we discourage subbing. It's not something you're supposed to be doing. You are supposed to sign up the speaker who intends to testify, and that speaker is supposed to testify. So I would say even when the legislature's in full swing, you shouldn't be subbing. And now when they're even in a virtual environment, it's more important that you don't do things like that. Also, the committee clerks have a lot more control now, and you know, because they're assigning everybody names and numbers as they're being entered into the Zoom rooms. If you're not on that list, they're not going to admit you. Some people have still found ways to get around that, and you know, got accidentally admitted and would unmute themselves and talk when they're not supposed to. As I can say, it's not a good look to do it. I don't recommend it. I recommend follow the process, do your 3 minutes, take your questions, and follow up if you have follow-up questions, and be respectful, and don't do anything to cheat the system, because if you cheating the system will get back to us and our campaign sooner or later.
Yeah,
Great.
the only other thing I would just say about that, I used to be a clerk, and the first day I showed up for the job, the person who handed the baton to me said, "A whip and a chair is all you need." Public hearings are super intense for the staff, and we rely on staff to help us in so many different ways that what we really want to be focusing on, although testimony is important and delivering testimony is important, what we really want to be focusing on is creating positive relationships and making sure they understand what the policy issues are. And so if we're spending a lot of our capital, right, our relationships in making an accommodation because somebody was in the bathroom when they got their name called and now they want to go, or they couldn't go, but they signed up and they want somebody else to go instead. We have limited opportunities to engage people just because of the virtual environment. And if we use it up around public hearing testimony, we're less likely to be able to engage in a positive, uplifting, motivational way if we've spent all this time being one of the many people talking to them about logistics. So, we need to use our power well.
And I'll add that we actually have a former clerk on this conference, Sonia, who was the clerk of the Labor Committee. And I saw her text where she said, as a former clerk, I agree. Sonia handled one of the most intensive committees in the state of Connecticut that gets the most people signed up. I'm watching a labor committee right now that has 116 signed up. And I'd say that's a light day for labor. So, as Kate said, respect the staff and they're working hard, and do everything you can to keep everything positive.
Great. Thank you both so much. We're fastly moving through this hour, so I want to pass it over to Chelsea to run us through our legislative priorities. Again, we'll have one last opportunity for questions. So if you don't want to speak up by unmuting yourself at that point, feel free to drop it in the chat, but otherwise you'll have one more opportunity to drop some questions before we wrap up. But with that, I'll pass it over to Chelsea.
Hello, my name is Kaylee Pratt. I'm a senior policy analyst at the Partnership for Strong Communities. Today, I hope to provide you with information on Home Connecticut's legislative agenda. Home Connecticut works to end Connecticut's affordable housing shortage with the goal to ensure that all Connecticut residents have access to a range of affordable housing choices in all communities in the state. Since 2004, the Home Connecticut campaign has brought together more than 100 diverse stakeholders, including housing advocates, nonprofit organizations, business leaders, lenders, nonprofit and private housing developers, and builders who care about ensuring every resident has a safe, stable place to call home. Our 2021 legislative agenda is a consensus agenda that was developed with input from our Home Connecticut Advisory Committee, a broad-based group with members listed here. The Home Connecticut campaign knows that safe, affordable housing is critical for our state's residents and our economy. When our state's residents have stable housing, their economic and health outcomes improve. The priorities identified by the campaign aim to ensure stable housing for Connecticut residents and expand housing opportunity for all. There are 5 priorities on the 2021 Home Connecticut legislative agenda, organized into the 3 categories shown here: reform land use, invest in affordable housing, and stabilize the rental market for tenants and landlords. First, we are asking the legislature to strengthen the Zoning Enabling Act and provide guidance to municipalities in preparing their required affordable housing plans by amending Connecticut General Statute Section 8-2 to require zoning regulations affirmatively further the purposes of the Federal Fair Housing Act, which prohibits discrimination based on race, color, national origin, ancestry, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. To eliminate the phrase character of the district from zoning regulations, Section 8-2 already authorizes objective factors that reflect character of the community, including historic preservation, environmental impact, scale, height, etc. The phrase character of the district has too often been used to prevent housing diversity when evidence of these objective factors is lacking. To require municipalities comply with the existing law's affordable housing planning requirement by January 1st, 2023, and to require zoning regulations allow accessory dwelling units and 2 to 4 family housing as of right. Additionally, we are asking the legislature to mandate training on housing issues for local planning and zoning commissions by requiring training for planning and zoning commissioners of 5 hours per year by 2023, 2 of which must relate to multifamily housing and 1 hour must relate to fair housing. Planning and zoning commissions make important land use decisions that affect the function of their communities for many years. 7 states currently require training for members of these commissions. Connecticut is not one of them. We recommend that the state require training and develop a curriculum to ensure that commissioners are provided with the educational resources needed in order to make these important land use decisions. Next, we support the strategic affordable housing capital investments in Governor Lamont's proposed budget by investing $200 million in the state affordable housing flex fund and $105 million in the state housing trust fund over the biennium, which includes a $30 million each year for the state-sponsored housing portfolio. Helping rent-burdened families and families experiencing homelessness obtain and maintain permanent affordable housing as quickly as possible is critical to the stabilization of families and economic growth. Building new and rehabilitating existing affordable housing generates millions of dollars in new economic activity, creates jobs, and broadens the state's tax base. We must continue making critical capital investments in affordable housing to expand housing choices for families across Connecticut, preserve existing affordable rental homes at risk of loss, and support the state's economy. Next, we are asking the legislature to provide necessary rental relief funding in response to the harms caused by COVID-19 by investing an additional $100 million in state funding to support our state's low-income residents and landlords housing them. The COVID-19 pandemic has increased the risk of low and moderate income families becoming unstably housed or homeless, with families of color disproportionately impacted by this crisis. Housing displacement and eviction prevention is a key component of controlling the pandemic by reducing infection, transmission, illness, hospitalizations, and death, and to address health inequity. We support the investment of at least an additional $100 million in state funding to provide relief to tenants before and during eviction proceedings, stabilize landlords' operating budgets and the private rental market, and prevent evictions and the resulting displacement of individuals and families. And lastly, we are asking for the investment in ongoing rental supports through the addition of at least $20 million per year to the Rental Assistance Program, or RAP. An investment of this size would support approximately 2,000 more of our lowest income households. Even prior to COVID-19, 120,000 rental households in Connecticut were severely cost burdened or spending more than 50% of their income on housing costs. These state vouchers are the most cost-effective way to provide affordable housing to our lowest income and most vulnerable populations. We are looking forward to your support on this agenda, and we invite you to reach out with any questions. Thank you.
So I'm going to bring us home here. So Danielle gave you a bunch of ways in which you can get involved in advocacy, and we're encouraging you to use this long but important collective agenda and the tools and support that we've provided you or that we're willing to provide to you to help you make sure that your voice is heard this session. And I think because we don't have a ton of time for questions, I haven't seen any in the chat anyway. On the next slide, we have all of our contact information. And your first stop is usually Danielle or Kaylee over on the right. So Danielle staffs Reaching Home campaign and Kaylee staffs the Home Connecticut campaign, but any of our policy staff will be happy to talk to you and help you in any way as you work to advocate this session and beyond. 2 o'clock on the dot, Danielle. So I'll thank people as we close out. Thank you for your time. Please get in touch with us with any questions. And we look forward to virtually seeing you on a hearing soon or reading your testimony. And good luck in your advocacy.
Thank
everybody.
you all.